Joining me this week is Rup Singh, founder of Intuit Factory, based here out of Atlanta, yes?
Yes.
So before we kind of dive into the broader conversation, my favorite question to ask folks to kind of kick the podcast off is how they came into the digital identity space. You know, myself is kind of a payments and anti-money laundering avenue, but given the breadth of the topics we explore and the centrality of digital identity to all of them, would love to hear kind of your personal creation story as to how you came to be in the digital identity space and get excited about it.
Sure. I came to this space to work. I think that's a driving factor for me in a lot of things that I do. So, in 2017, I was in a corporate world doing things that I like to do at that time, business process automation, business process improvement, things of that nature. And then I found that most companies around me, the company I was with, all of them are working on boring problems with technology that are 20 years old. They're not working on problems in the future. They're not doing things that are going to manifest themselves in 5 to 10 years. They're still grappling with things that some of us have solved, or they're grappling with things that generally companies deal with, like growth and expansion, things of that nature, which can be exciting, but it just wasn't exciting. So I wanted to be on the leading edge of technology. I wanted to be on solving the problems that are more nuanced, more complex, more exciting, more interesting. And I somehow left that company and started traveling. And through my travels, I heard a voice abroad and it said blockchain. So then I found blockchain. And I started researching what blockchain was and why it was interesting, what changes was it beginning to create in our society, and what the power of blockchain could be potentially. I came across a number of different areas. That was my entry into blockchain per se. As I got into the blockchain journey, I discovered a few use cases of it, and as a lot of us would have figured out, if you've heard about the term blockchain, that it is a foundational technology that can impact a number of areas. And one other thing I found was much more profound and much more core central to impact and changing the world would have been a thing called identity. So of it. And I thought that blockchain is an amazing solution for a lot of the challenges that you just mentioned in your introduction. So that's been my journey into the space. And I started exploring more and found out how the challenges that we face today, and it feels like this is a room of believers. I don't think we have too many skeptics here. So I don't think we'll be making too many conversions today. But what I did find is that even with skeptics, even with believers, where we're going is not a concrete idea that everybody can agree to. I think we can all align on the set of problems that we have. And I think Shanta and I were talking earlier before we started here. We can align with, well, this is the problem space. I think we get a similar view on how we see the world that we come from. But the question is, well, if we take it, we're the people who are designing it. So how can we get there? What is the most effective way? What will be the world that we will live in? What will be the identity of identity, so to say, in the next 10, 50 years?
I like that. So for folks who aren't familiar with Intuit Factory specifically, would you mind a bit of a primer on what it is, your mission statement, and what you guys will do?
Sure. So we are a blockchain education and strategy firm with 3 practice areas: educational programs, advisory, and investment programs. So in other words, we help navigate clients' blockchain journey depending on where they are. They could be at stage of awareness or curiosity. We take them from wherever they find themselves in to more deeper understanding, to investment and action. And this could take many different forms. As I said, it's a space that has multiple use cases. So it could be in supply chain, it could be digital identity, or it could be in healthcare, it could be in retail, it could be in payments, just because there are so many use cases.
I thought it was really fascinating that you mentioned kind of blockchain as one of your entry points to identity. When you talk to folks about blockchain who are maybe laymen when it comes to understanding, I think one of the misconceptions around blockchain is the concept of anonymity, like, oh, I'm using blockchain because I don't want people to know what I'm doing and allows you to be anonymous, which in some ways is incorrect because, Bitcoin, for example, is not anonymous, it's pseudonymous. You have a persistent identifier that in many ways is much easier to track than something like cash, where there is no central ledger that you can recreate over time. But somewhat paradoxically, the nature of blockchain and the potential for anonymity or pseudonymity really makes identity that much more important to me when you think about it, because the only way you can really be sure about any piece of information on the blockchain is to establish an identity layer and tie meaningful identity credentials to it, because the network itself does not provide any assurance in many cases to the veracity of a piece of information someone had put forth, other than the other pieces of information you can tie to it. From that perspective, where do you see the future of identity and blockchain going? Do you feel very strongly around user-centric identity and user-centric control of their personal data through blockchain being kind of the killer application that we have yet to see kind of be operationalized in the blockchain market?
Yes, yes. So, to me, ownership of our own digital identity is a fundamental human right. We must have it. Simple as that. When you were speaking earlier, I thought about, you mentioned how, and then you mentioned what. I think we need to increasingly talk about the why this digital identity problem is a problem in the first place. Because a lot of skeptics would say, well, it's not really a problem. I'm living my life on it. The question to me is, our real life and non-digital identity affects our digital experience, and our digital experience affects our real life experience. Right? So let's take some extreme examples. If you're a refugee trying to flee a country torn by war or economic strife, if you don't have credentials to prove who you are, well, good luck with that in the next country that you're in. So that's an extreme example the other way around. You can take this, there are plenty of examples that show you how your non-digital or real life identity affects your digital experience. So I think the layers are so intertwined now that increasingly we should talk about what that experience looks like for us as society, as humans. And there are other actors involved. There are obviously roles for government and companies. And how does that manifest? Who controls what? And as you probably know, internet does not have an identity. I think we talked about there were people who were designing the internet at that time, and TCP/IP, etc., were being established. There was a lot of conversation on developing identity there, but somehow we didn't. If we did, we actually may not have had the business models that we have for today. We may not have had the same type of experience that we have from Facebook, Instagram, Google, etc., even Amazon for that matter, that we have today. It might have been slightly different because we may have a layer of identity. The same way we have a DNS system for websites, we could have had a DNS system for humans and for things. So in the absence of that, now we have to solve that problem, and we put a lot of steps in the middle. To me, blockchain is not just a technological solution, it's a strategy which can bring multiple stakeholders together. It's not just, I'm opposed to, government should know what I want to do, or I'm opposed to a company should be providing my credential. It's how do we solve for all of these stakeholders and each of their interests. And blockchain-based platforms that enable such digital identity can solve for all these different stakeholders. Does that make sense?
It does. To unpack that a little bit, I think, bringing it to payments, given that we're in Atlanta, payments-focused event, obviously, who you are in a system for some applications can be based on an attestation that maybe doesn't have much weight, like might, a pet sharing service or something like that, maybe a loose identity credential that I get from other users on the platform who vouch for my trustworthiness might be enough. But when it comes to something like payments, where the government is involved and they demand a tie back to government-issued credentials, that is where the systems in many ways have fallen short in terms of user accessibility and inclusion because of that necessary link to the government. How do you see blockchain solutions kind of helping to bridge that gap and be that missing layer that can connect individuals who may lack an identity with some of the financial and economic platforms that they may have been excluded from.
Yeah. So I look at it on a spectrum. There are, let's call them low trust environments or use cases, and then very high trust environments. So let's take an example of high trust environments and then we can backtrack. So think about your airline's flying experience. We need to know exactly who you are, not just that, probably not more details about you and just your name. So now let's look at blockchain-based solutions that are solving for that. So there are airlines that are experimenting with biometric-based identity that are now connected to a government-issued identity, of course. And they're even connected to the airline-issued ticket. So if you can connect those data points, and the government can accept that, yes, this is something valid, you can start using the system and sort of let you in their world and become a partner in establishing those credentials with you. And then we take that use case further. So the question to me then becomes, where is that data being stored? Because that, if it falls into the wrong hands, could cause a lot of damage. So we should move away from this whole database way of storing. I think Travis and I, and we were talking about breaches before we got started. So you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. If you don't want to put a wall and say, here, take this data, we have to develop other solutions. And I think we developed some point-based solutions. We have reactive solutions in terms of cybersecurity. But how about dealing with the fundamental issue with the storing things? And to me, those credentials, I don't think credentials should be stored on blockchain, just to be very technical. I think accreditations or attestations should be stored, and it should be stored on the blockchain. And then we should have a much more distributed model for not storing those identity, core identity credentials so that they're not compromised. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess I'm unpacking that a little bit more. So in thinking about the blockchain solutions that are kind of emerging in the space, allowing for credentialing, the exchange of attestations, standards obviously a very big part of that when you're looking at the self-sovereign identity space. We have a number of different players emerging. Do you have a perspective on where you see that end game coming? Do you think there is enough space in the blockchain community for multiple competing standards? Do you see a consolidation coming, or do you see maybe a higher level framework that you can have multiple competing platforms kind of agreeing on certification frameworks, for example, so that it can be interoperable between my Uport and my sovereign wallet, and that way the user doesn't have to go around re-credentialing themselves every time the new platform springs up?
Yeah, so this is an issue of adoption that's much broader than just the identity space. If you look at approaches to it, there's a government-based approach. I think Australian government have suggested a public infrastructure of identity, or framework, even code, set standards behind it that code can use. I think that's a very interesting dimension. I don't know if we will ever get to it because we still haven't agreed what time zone we live in. So just getting countries and jurisdictions to agree on anything is a challenge, and I don't think it happens that quickly. But that's a valid approach. I think that approach should continue. Although you would find a case study out of the UK where they started doing UK E-Verify, and that approach was not that successful. So there's examples of both sides. If you start talking about companies, you mentioned the two companies that was going to mention, Sovereign and Uport. I eventually think in the blockchain space we will have multiple formats. I don't think there will be takes all approach. I have my personal preferences, and they go back to the use case that we're solving for. So it's sometimes we get lost in these philosophical discussions on broader agreements versus, well, what's the tactical solution that we're looking for per se, and maybe we can solve for that a little bit. At the end of the day, what matters is adoption. It's the footprint that counts. You can have, I don't think superior technology always wins. Superior technology is not worth anything, only adopted technology is worth something. So Uport may be superior, maybe more mobile-centric, maybe more consumer-focused, and Sovereign may be more superior in terms of its architecture, fact that it's a public permission-based chain, the fact that it has validators, companies can become validators. I really like that model. I think that's an interesting hybrid model between the extreme of completely public chains and completely private chains. But the question becomes, then how are we going to adopt it? And that's that. I have opinions on it, but I will roll that question back to the room. How are you guys adopting it? Because you are creating this world together eventually.
So bringing it back, I guess, to payments for a hot minute. You know, Bitcoin, obviously, while it hasn't maybe reached the levels of a transactional currency that you know, massive Bitcoin proponents would say that it's destined to, and you know, replacing fiat currency across the globe, and all of these sorts of claims. It has obviously been wildly successful to the point of, you know, my uncle was calling me up about what kind of cold wallet should I be buying for my coin storage and all that sort of stuff. Do you feel, you know, as somebody who has his finger on the pulse of the blockchain space, that there are adoption lessons that we can learn from the story of Bitcoin and its moderate level of success in becoming a pretty widely accepted transactional currency that we can port over to the identity space?
That's a very interesting question. There are two things that come to mind. So somebody said this the other day, and I started researching it. And this is an open-ended question. Maybe after the session, we can have somebody who has the answer. Anybody's been to a Rolling Stones concert? Right? So some of you have. Rolling Stones is a band that's been around, I don't know, 40 years, something like that, right? How does a band become adopted? How does a band become popular? For that matter, how did Beatles become popular? There's similar sound in that genre of that generation. How did Rolling Stones survive 40 years of music disruption by other bands? That's the answer. So I don't think there's one element you can point to. I'm curious to research this further, but I think that lessons should be learned there. Because at the end of the day, it's consumer adoption. Okay? So if you go back in the technology space, I came from the world of telecom. There was a time I was running a program for a UN-based nonprofit called ICT for Development, where we used to track information and communication technologies for social and economic development. And at that time, it's about 15 years ago, at that time we used to talk about Wi-Fi, mesh networks, and WLAN, and LTE. Anybody heard of these things back in the day? Right, you can come from that world. So we had these in standard world. There were conferences, there were LTE conferences, there were conferences, there were WLAN conferences. There were, you know, a lot of companies, the same companies we did back today, Intel's, the IBM, the Microsofts of the world, were pouring money into these two standards. So there is something to be said about where the money flows, and that's what gets adopted. The other aspect, of course, is what's faster, better, simpler. Right? Coming back to the blockchain space, again, I don't think that we will live in a world where a winner takes all. There will be multiple formats, multiple platforms per use case. And even digital identity, to me, is not one use case. You can actually separate that out into multiple use cases. And it could be that Solid becomes the choice of platform for, let's say, PII for banking, because it's a high trust industry, so to say. Versus, I don't know, if you buy groceries and you identify yourself for loyalty points, it may be that you would use people. Right? Both of them can be equally adopted with different business models. Does that take you somewhere?
Yeah, I guess to clarify, in the sense of the classic chicken egg conundrum of, you know, how do you get consumers to adopt a use case when you don't really have an end use for it, and how do you attract businesses to accept a standard or a platform for identity when there is no critical mass of users. It sounds like you, I'm trying to think if the consumers are the chicken and the egg here, but it sounds like you think it should be kind of a ground up approach where you convince consumers that there are meaningful applications for them, and then from there the consumers will attract the businesses that are going to want their business.
Yeah, I'll change one word in what you said. I don't think you need to be convinced the consumer. As a consumer, you don't need to convince me. If it works, it works. If it's simpler, better, faster for me, it just is. Right? It's just, I will tell you, and you will tell your friend, and that's how adoption happens. So if the band is good, why do you go to a concert? Because your friends or something like that. So I think there is something to be said about organic revenue production. And that's a social phenomenon that a lot of universities are study. So to me, it's not just you can convince, you can do things right in terms of your approach to how you get to a consumer and how you present. So sometimes you may not even know, Pixar, a lot of you guys here have identity solutions. A consumer may not know that I'm using your solution. But if that's the better, easier, faster solution for you, that's just what I use. So I think that's the way you will see adoption more and more. What's the answer? Why did Facebook succeed in MySpace not? Or Friendster not? You tell me. So there is something to the magic of it. And I'm not trying to take the science and the business logic behind it. So here's the business logic answer. I teach a program called Blockchain Strategy for Business Leaders. One of the modules is ecosystem. So you must design an ecosystem because it will lower your co-innovation risk. You cannot have innovation in products that are not connected end-to-end into the entire supply chain, either to the consumer or your supply chain partner, because if that's the case, your product will not be adopted. Multiple use cases to think about there. If you've read this book called The White Rinse by Ron Hancock, it talks about a case study of Michelin tires. Michelin in the 90s, I think, developed a tire that could run for 120 miles after being punctured. It's an excellent innovation. After it gets a hole, it can run 120 miles. No other tire will do that. And they started putting it, they partnered with Mercedes, they started putting it on stand. Mercedes, you know what the problem was? They didn't go to the garages to give them machines to change the power. So when the tire did actually break after maybe 6 months or a year, people would go to the garage, to the shop to get it repaired or changed, the garage guy didn't know what to do. Hence the co-innovation risk. So you have to develop your ecosystem. You cannot innovate or expect your product to be adopted in isolation. And when you talk to startups or even larger companies for that matter, a lot of them seem to think that just because they have a brand name or startup would say just because we have a superior technology or even a superior product, we don't need partners. We don't need to get to the consumer. We don't need to reduce our co-innovation risk or adoption risk. So that is something that you must think of and do as you're developing identity-based solutions. You could be known. Honestly, if I have an identity company, I don't want to be known. What I want is the consumer to use it, regardless of the name. Does that make sense?
It does. So, again, kind of tying identity back to transactions and in some way payments. One of the big debates that's going on within the identity community around personal data is what is the future of personal data and should it, for lack of a better word, be commoditized by consumers and profited from, or should some data remain sacrosanct, and are consumers in many ways considered responsible enough to take control of this information and be in control of their data and not be, I guess, exploited, for lack of a better word, by those people wishing to purchase it. Where do you see the innovation happening in this space, and I guess where on that ethical spectrum do you fall in terms of where the ethical border between responsible use and meaningful consent that consumers provide, and where some of that may go awry into kind of a dystopian future state?
Yeah. I think directionally, we will end up in an era where critical data is traded on data marketplaces, and consumer or group of consumers will have the ability to trade data back and forth. We have to define what that critical data is, and the market will define what the value, the monetary value of that trade will be. Right? So taking an example, if I went out in the world and said, let me trade my Facebook or Instagram picture, look at me, I don't think it's going to be that bad. But if I found out that based on my genetics, I have a genetic disease that some researchers want to really study, and in fact, I don't know, 80 million people, maybe my data has value, my genetic data has value. So maybe there's a university or a researcher that's willing to buy that set of data of a similar demographic as mine at that particular level. So we will eventually get to data sharing marketplaces. That's happening already. Right? So that happens today, but the consumer is not involved in that trade. And so I think that's the shift we need to see, where we as consumers have consent over what is ours and what is being shared, not just consent, we should have compensation for it. Now, the biggest shift there is business models. I think we are too far down the road today in terms of the amount of data that's being generated and the moats that are created around that data and the business models and the ecosystem that are already created to break that long term of data is the new oil. So, and sometimes if you talk to data folks, they would say, data is irrelevant. What you do with it is the important part. It's the analytics part. It's the intelligence you create out of it. And there is some value in that. So they trade data all the time. So the question is, can we change those business models? So here are a couple of interesting directions that that could take. If you've heard of that basic pension token, which is probably not the right title for what they're trying to do, but it's about the data economy, it's about the attention economy. We are generating this data, so we should be part of that compensation. We should direct our attention to where our interests are. I think that's an interesting part. There is a group out of California called People Centered Engineering. It was started by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, founder of the World Wide Web. And his vision is to bring the human back into the internet. We started it in a distributed or decentralized way, and sort of taken that out. Most of the internet experience today is decentralized. He wants to bring human back into the equation. So to me, the direction it could take is that we develop a business model and one of them becomes successful. So successful that maybe there is a version of Instagram that is blockchain based and it provides you tokens to use like a scheme. Right? So I think we're at the stage where these are still experiments. I don't think there's a clear agreement yet. But eventually I do know this that, well, I certainly believe that we will get to.
So before we go, I do have one final question for you that is kind of a favorite of mine for the podcast, which is predictions for the future. Did you bring your crystal ball? I think you mentioned that you do have your crystal ball here with you today. Would love to hear your thoughts for the predictions of digital identity as we move out of 2019 into 2020, and where you see exciting developments happening. And obviously, feel free to sprinkle in blockchain as you fit in your personal area of expertise.
Yeah, I think it's hard to make predictions in the short term. I'll make directional predictions if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So, as I said before, eventually we will get to leadership. In terms of other blockchain predictions, since we're in the payment space, retail payments and trade finance payments, specifically trade finance payments, will be on some form of blockchain-based cryptographically secure network. Not so far in the future. There are people who say it can happen. 100% of these payments could happen in the next 5 years. I think that's a little aggressive. It can happen in the next 7 to 8 years. So, what else? As we look at, here's the other aspect of identity that we don't really talk about as much in these discussions, is the identity of things. Right? So if you look around the world that we're getting to, when AI is evolving, in fact, it's much more evolved than blockchain space for that matter, than industry. Autonomous vehicles and everything to do with IoT and IIoT is evolving very rapidly. It's getting adopted by industry much more rapidly than ever before. So if you look at the amount of data that we will be generating based on the number of people coming online, number of devices, the number of smartphones, and the number of smart devices, if you will, the amount of data that we will be generating needs an underlying data layer to transfer it and store it securely. I do think that blockchain-based platforms will be those underlying platforms where you can store and secure that data. What else? There is, I think we will, this is in the blockchain space, we will tokenize all assets. And by that I mean all the physical assets that we consider valuable. It's building, art, sneakers, all of them will eventually become digital tokens and be traded in global markets, secondary markets. Even for that matter, related to my previous point, digital identity, your set of data will be quote unquote tokenized and packaged in that trade. What else can I think of? Specifically in terms of digital identity, I think there is a lot more pressure because of the extent of hacks that companies need to reinvent that model somehow, unless they want to be dealing with the liability of it. So the progressive companies are not trying to sort of go back and reconfigure what they have, they're trying to start from a better model. So I think you will see a shift in technology where you will start from blockchain-based platforms. And if they're not, well, then they'll have a better answer for hacks. And so most of the cybersecurity space is reactive. I came from a cybersecurity company, so 80% of what we do is reactive. Maybe 20% is proactive. So it's a game of cat and mouse that we compete. But if we want to get to a better model, we have to get to blockchain-based solutions. I'm just too bullish about it. So that's where I am. Any other thoughts? You guys have any other areas you want to comment on? It might just generate a few brainwaves here.
Do you have any questions? Any audience? No?
Fantastic. Well, I think we do want to move along for the next panel. So this was so fantastic. For folks who are going to listen to this online and are interested to learn more about Intuit Factory or that course you teach on blockchain, where should they go to find out more?
Sure, they can go to intuitfactory.com. And if you go into our video section, there's over 35 videos and hours of me blabbering like this, so you might learn something out of it.
Fantastic. We'll make sure to include those links in the show notes below, so check them out. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope to have you on again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.